Curator there introduced me, and she said, "I'd like to introduce you to Dr. Peter Jablonski." Wow! So I had to, clarify because what happened is she said, "Can you send me a brief description of your talk?" So I sent her a description, and then I signed it, and I put after my name PhD, and then in parentheses I put Privy hole digger, but she didn't apparently see that part.
Or Melissa.
Yeah, it was Melissa. Yeah. So anyways, when I was about 11 years old, my dad, he liked to make wine. So we went behind the Clinton Bailey Market, and he wanted to, end of summer, he wanted to pick elderberries. So I helped him pick, and after about, 15, 20 minutes, you've had enough. So I went off exploring this field, and I come to realize that it was an old dump, and guys, there were holes where they'd been digging, and things that were broken or they didn't want were laying all around. So that kind of got me interested in bottles and in the past, kind of researching, where was this company and what was this product, that type of thing. But since that time, I was president of the Niagara Frontier Relic Hunters. I was into metal detecting, and I was in the Buffalo Aqua Club. I would dive in the river for bottles. But if you really want to find the old glass, like before the Civil War age, you got to dig the Privies. It's possible you could find a dump, but most dumps are kind of surface dumps. Unless I'm sure there's some around, but most of them are usually turn of the century or newer stuff. So we're after the real early stuff. So why do we dig outhouse pits? Because they didn't have garbage pickup and people would throw their trash. And what you're looking at is what people threw out, or sometimes fell in accidentally. So the way we find it, this is a spring steel rod, and it's got to have a tip on it. And this tip will actually, eventually, from when you keep sticking it to the ground, it'll wear down. And believe it or not, when it gets pointed, you can't even stick the probe in the ground. You need that wider area it gives you an advantage to push it in. So if this was a house here and this is the backyard, okay, first of all, you gotta find small town, small city lots. Out in the country, you could dig a privy, but it's very difficult because it could be anywhere on the property and there's just too much land to find it. So if this was the house, what I would first do is, and let's say this was the fence, I would first start in one corner. Especially if the door was right here of the house. This is where I would start, right in the corner. And then go all along the fence line. Well, a lot of times the door is right out the back of the house. So a lot of times it's directly in line with the door. So we go all along the edge of the property and then all along the fence line. It could be, there's no rhyme or reason. Usually, you wanted to keep it as far away from the house as possible to reduce the odor, right? But sometimes they were right next to the house or attached. So what happens, you stick this probe in the ground. Most areas, it's only going to go in this deep and you're hitting clay. You can't push it in. But you get areas, all of a sudden you're pushing it in, all of a sudden, whoosh, plunges right to the handle. And you pull it out, look at your tip. You usually see white or black ash. Not always, but that's usually the telltale sign. So if it plunged here, it should plunge here, here, basically about the size of a city sidewalk. Okay? And then once you go out of that area, it doesn't plunge. So what we do is we just take some sticks, lay them out, take one tarp, cut out the sod in squares, put it up, and we leave the dirt so it'll stay alive. We put it all, just like a jigsaw puzzle. The way we cut it, that's how we put it on the tarp. Then we lay out a bigger tarp, and that's where we throw the dirt. Set that down. So the first 8-10 inches, you got nice, real black topsoil. Once you get through that, usually you have ash. So they would use ash to help reduce the odor. Okay? I'm going to pass around a few things, and don't talk to your neighbor. Shh. Just keep it to yourself, okay? We'll pass one here, and we can start one there, and we'll start one down here. Don't talk to your neighbor, just look at it. Okay, and then pass it all around, and I'll keep talking while you're looking. Okay? So then, once you get through all that ash, then you get a change in color. It gets dark again. That's the midnight soil, okay? So that is where we find most of the trash. As you're digging along, you might come up with some shards of china, maybe a marble, maybe a few little bottles. But usually it's at the bottom where everything's sunk in. Okay? Now, in western New York, especially Lockport, Niagara Falls, when you dig, usually it's a stone-lined privy. So the whole bottom vault, it looks just like a foundation of a basement. It's all stone. Okay? Well, usually the depth is about up to my chest. Day before Thanksgiving, we were in a 10-footer in Lockport. Yeah. Buffalo, they're shallower, maybe 4.5, 4 feet. Wood liners, so you'll see wood timbers all along. One time I was digging, and with a piece of metal, throw it on the pile, and then I'm digging, there's another piece, and as I pulled it out, I noticed this thing is going around me. It was a barrel privy. That was the stave of the barrel. So they would sink big barrels down. Now, some yards we can find 3 or 4 privies, because, as somebody said, somebody was telling about their grandfather's privy, he would move it, right? Once the hole filled in, they would move it. Yeah. Now, City of Buffalo had an ordinance, well, a lot of cities did, and they had honey dippers at night. They had an ordinance, they had to pump them out. It was for, I'm sure for health reasons, because obviously this would be a health issue. So that is how we find them. How are we doing on that jar? Where is it?
The little jar's here.
Okay. Well, we'll wait. I'll let you. Okay.
Do you use ground penetrating radar?
We do not. We were thinking of buying it. It's about $5,000. And then, is it really going to show you?
Ground penetrating radar.
So, and sometimes it's not so easy to just probe, because sometimes, especially some areas, it's all rock. So every time you're pushing it in, you're hitting rock. But that could also be a sign. Like if most of the yard, there's no rock, and all of a sudden one area there's rock, you want to try to probe and get in between the rocks till you feel a plunge, and then, aha, there's something down there, because they could have filled it with rocks. Once in a while, we'll walk in a yard and you can just see the dip. That's usually rare, because usually people level it off. So, doing there? They got the bag back there. All right. How about, who knows what's in that bag right there? Raise your hand. Anybody, the bag with the white?
Oh.
Yes.
Isn't that ash from the cinders from the old stoves they used to put it on the snow and ice?
It is not ash, but that's a good guess. There is ash in the Privies. And that's, one of the ways we tell, because especially some areas the soil's soft, so your probe can go in real easy everywhere. Anybody? No? How about the jar? Who's got the jar? What's in the jar?
There's a bone in the jar. Seeds.
What's that?
Seeds.
It is seeds.
Yeah.
What kind of seeds?
There's a bone in there.
Come on, there's any farmers in here?
Strawberry?
Close. I think it's raspberries, but you're very close. So, if I was to dig a privy today or tomorrow, another way you know you're in the privy, first of all, they gather water. These things gather water. They also gather roots. Where the water is, the roots follow. So usually there's a lot of roots if you're near a tree, but also if there's groundwater, you're going to see the seeds floating all over the place. Or if you're in the summer, once you get to that midnight soil, you know you're in the privy, you see the seeds down there. So that one jar has seeds. The one bag has seeds. What about the white?
Lime?
Lime, yes. The lime was to reduce the odor. And believe it or not, a lot of times, as soon as we just start opening that gap of soil, guess what? You smell this lemony scent. And believe it or not, it happens. All right. Let's talk a little bit about glass. So, Western New York, two major glass houses, Lockport Glass Works and Lancaster. Both located near railroads, and of course, Lockport's near the canal. Remember, the roads back then were terrible, dirt roads. So to ship glass by horse would be rough. It would be a tough journey on them bottles. So that's one reason. The other reason is you had to have that furnace going 24/7 because you had to reach about 2,300 degrees Fahrenheit. So you can't just come in the morning and start the fire. It's not going to happen. You got to keep it going. So there was a large supply of hardwoods to burn, and you had lots of sand. Glass is made up of sand. And also they used ash too. So those two glass houses, what they would do, this is a historic flask. This is the cornucopia, and on the other side is the urn. So they would have a wood mold. Usually they would use like an apple tree, something hardwood, and they carved the picture into the mold. They took what they called a gather of glass, put it in that mold, then with the blow rod they would blow into that mold and it took the shape. Then they opened the mold, they took a small gather of glass in the bottom of a rod called a punty or a pontil rod, and they would stick it in there, then they took shears and they would shape the lip. When they were done, they snapped that rod off. And this in the bottom is called an open panel mark. Okay? So this is this could be 1840s somewhere to 1860 in that time period.
What do you think was in there?
Whiskey. These are whiskey flasks. So cornucopia that's one mold. Many of them featured presidents. Lincoln, Washington, and they were used for political campaigns. Here, have a drink on me, so and vote for me. This one here is Success to the Railroad. And if you look, it's in pieces, but this railroad was being pulled by a horse. That's how railroads started. Horses were pulling the carts on the track. So this flask, you look here, it says Success. It was Success to the Railroad. And again, there's your open panel mark. And a lot of times this glass was really jagged where the bottle won't even stand up and they'd have to file it. And I love to find, even if they're broken, I'd rather find broken 1840 glass than whole 1900, because to me, you know, that stuff was mass produced. I'd rather find the old stuff. I like the history a lot more. So historic flasks are one area of collecting. This one, and this color we call Lockport green, very distinctive. So the color of the glass is based on either what was in the sand or what they added to the mixture. So iron gives you green. This is cobalt blue from adding cobalt. But this bottle says Oak Orchard Acid Springs. That's located, well, it's gone. The hotel was, I think it burned down. It's where the Iroquois Wildlife Refuge is.
We've been there.
If you go on Casey Road to their visitor center, they have these bottles in different colors, and the summer program dug them in wells that were there. But this says C.W. Merchant, Lockport, New York. This was made at Lockport Glass Works. And of course, the people went to these springs. There was a different colored bottle for each different spring. So if one had magnesium in it, one was sulfur, they used different glass colors for the different springs. Of course, their major springs were Saratoga, Saratoga Springs. But there was one in Darien, and I do have a bottle that is Darien Springs. This bottle is from Lancaster Glass Works, says it right on there. This is what we call a iron paneled soda. So they improved the glass making process, and instead of putting glass at the bottom of the rod, they just pushed the rod in and it left that indentation. Now, if you have champagne bottles, that's not an iron panel, that's what you call a kick-up. And that was to help with the pressure in that bottle. Okay? You can't see the iron, it's worn off, but there is this one, which my box had little styrofoam things, but you can see the iron stain on it. This is Burn Waters. They were soda and mineral water manufacturer in Buffalo. What else? So then, what they did is they improved it, the glass making process. No longer used panel rods. In the 1870s, they had a snap case. So the mold, they could just open it. They didn't have to put that rod in the bottom. So then you would just see a diagonal seam going across. And then eventually they didn't even need that, but they still had to form the lips. And we call these Blob Tops because of the bulbous top. And what they had in here was this one's all corroded, but it was a little metal bale with a rubber gasket. And when you didn't pull it out, you pushed it down. When you pushed it down, it released the carbonation. Guess what sound it made? Pop. And that's why they call it soda pop, because of this. So this stopper, the patent is 1879. It's called the Hutchinson Soda Stopper. Most of them are late 1890s up to the early 1900s. 1911, Owens automatic bottle machine. Then that kind of put the glass houses out of business. 7 Sutherland sisters. So they're between the 7 sisters, it was, I believe, 35 feet in length, all the hair. They started in Cambria.
Yep.
They were poor turkey farmers. And the mother died when the girls were a young age. So apparently she made some kind of ointment that she would put on their hair, and the kids at school hated the smell of this, so they would stay away from them. And anyways, the father made this hair product, Sutherland hair grower, and they became rich. They also were in the Barnum Freak Show. But they would sing, and what they would do, ready? They would let down their hair. And that was considered erotic and naughty. Yeah, in that time period, that was, but apparently, I don't know if it was sometime early 1900s, I don't know the exact date, maybe the 20s, but then the girls were doing the bob, you know, they cut their hair and they'd have the bob. And that, of course, wasn't good for business, but they were millionaires and they squandered the money, and the last one to die was buried in an unmarked grave. All right, what else we got here? Aha, Merchant's gargling oil for man or beast. Now it's called gargling oil, but really it was a liniment for aches and pains. So they were using it on the mules and horses that were hauling the boats. Started 1833, I think they went out of business 1920s, early 20s. And they come in all different colors. This is a nice, probably a Lockport green color. And they had all kinds of, in fact, there is a picture on the internet where there is the Maid of the Mist boat painted with the advertising. But they were painting barns, just like male pouch tobacco, they were painting barns with this. But they then eventually was also for human use, white label for humans, yellow for the beast. And you were able to take it internally then later. This is a bitters bottle, Dr. Hostetter's. And what bitters was a way to avoid the alcohol tax. It's not alcohol, it's medicine. It's got herbs in it, all right? It was booze. But, and apparently even these women who were, pushing for the temperance movement, they were drinking this because it wasn't considered alcohol, but that's what it was.
Medicine. It's good medicine, yeah.
Yeah.
So my main is medicine.
This is a Capitol Dome inkwell. What usually happens when you dig these privies, I mean, people think it's easy. Well, imagine 5-foot hole, all right? If it's full of ash and it's dry, it's easy. But guess what? Dig one tomorrow, it's going to keep filling up with water. So we got to keep bucketing the water out. And then everything is wet and heavy. Sometimes the one we dug the day before Thanksgiving was filled with clay. And that clay was heavy, heavy. And the only bottle we got out of that was one of these. But it was intact. It was nice to find. And we got a few little hair dyes. But what tends to happen is you find 1 or 2 nice bottles, a lot of what we call slicks, so bottles with nothing on them, no names. You get, a bunch of broken china. Sometimes you dig them and there's nothing in them. It's how it goes. All right. This one is a pharmacy from Suspension Bridge, which is now Niagara Falls. This is the only one I've ever seen. Most pharmacy bottles have a mortar and pestle. Some of them have like a mirror. This one has the suspension bridge. Now the fun part about it is, of course, finding something new, but then researching it. So the story behind the bridge, to build the bridge, what they did was they had a kite flying contest. Who could get the bridge across the Niagara River? So the kid who got it across first won. Then they took that kite string, probably put something like wire, or maybe just a bigger rope, until they kept bringing bigger and bigger ropes, until they could bring across the big cable to start the suspension bridge. I used to work right in Suspension Bridge, and I would do a archaeology day with my students, and we did dig New York Central Hotel. We dug this hotel, and the privies in hotels are a lot bigger. They have ironstone china, which is this white stuff, and you can tell it was a hotel because you're pulling this stuff out by the bucket full, broken plates and china. The other thing is, there were national products like Roma Seltzer, this Hostetter's Bitter. Certain things were national, but most sodas and beers, it was only local. So all the pharmacies would be local. But anytime I do a hotel privy, you can see the pharmacy. If you Google this, I got to think what it's called. New York Central Hotel Privy. The building's still standing right across from the William Street Post Office in Buffalo. But it doesn't look like a hotel, it just looks like an old house. And the article says it held like, I think 105 people or something. So I assume the rooms just had little cots, if they even had walls between them. It might have been more like a hostel. So in that one, we found a soda bottle from Chicago, and guess where were the cattle? Everything was coming from out west to the New York Central Stockyards, which is where the William Street Post Office is. That was the stockyards. Quick commercial, I brought some books for sale.